Cool.
So, yeah, take it off.
So on my side, yeah, I've just finished the work required to install all the different versions of Xcode. Each of them is on average like 6 gigabytes. So we're looking at like 60 gigabytes just from Xcode, or more, because that's the compressed size. Yeah, I'm currently running the first job that will include all of them, so hopefully that will go through. I'm seeing a lot of timeouts in the Mac Stadium VPN connection. I don't know if there's anything to do with the upgrade that they did last week. I will be having a meeting with customer service later today. The other point, oh, so I see Steve wrote something.
Yeah, I'm curious. Why is there a specific reason why we need to have multiple Xcode versions on the same machine?
It's how they build on iOS. You've got people like doing backward compatible builds, so that's why it's a little bit more complex. I think there's actually one user on the he has been commenting on the image issue. I think he's been commenting on the closed beta issue, but he's been giving us a lot of feedback as to some of the reasoning or the rationale.
Okay. And does it have to be on the same machine? Can we provide multiple machines with different Xcode versions?
You could. I mean, it's a possibility. Let me think here for a moment. I mean, I wonder if it would make the configurations a bit more complex. Like,
it's going to make the closed beta a lot more complex, because then we'll have to manage multiple runner versions for the same customer instead of one runner. But that is something that we can iterate on and have the autoscaler specify different kind of images depending on the job execution.
So later they would use a different tag depending on.
Exactly. So later on they can use, hey, I want the tag Xcode 12.9, for example. I don't know the versions, so I'm just specifying versions. So for example, for this job, I want Xcode 12.9, and for the next job, I want Xcode 13.0, for example. Yeah. And then they can use the matrix builds that we just released to do that as well. So I'm not sure if that would be a better option. And for closed beta, just say, hey, we support Xcode 1 and 2, just 2 versions, and that's it, instead of having multiple Xcode versions installed. Because me as a user, how am I gonna specify which versions to use, Pedro?
Oh, it's really easy. You just run xcode-select, and you select the version of Xcode you want to run, and then from then on, you're on this toolchain.
Okay, and how, Darren, you might know this. How do other competitors allow you to specify the Xcode version? Is it a matter of choosing which? How do you choose the Xcode version?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me look into that and add it to the agenda afterwards. That specific question, I don't know the answer offhand. So I'll look into that question and also double check the other question, which is, I believe, for example, that in the Microsoft image, they have all the Xcode versions, but I'll double check if they have all of them, or if like they're also, I think I saw one competitor that may be doing what you're recommending, which is offering like different things. So I'll take an action with both of those today.
If Patrick can leave a comment about this in the issue and specify that, one, we need to look at possibilities of having multiple image versions, and two, looking if we can have autoscaler support different kind of images depending on the tags that we specify. Because at the moment, the autoscaler does not support this. The way we're doing it for the Windows, because for example, we are using autoscaler for Windows 1809, Windows 1904, and Windows 1909. It's literally just 3 different runners registered using the same autoscaler binary and different autoscaler configuration. But ideally, we should try and support multiple images out of the box. That's not something that you configure. For example, like ideally, we should try and use the image keyword inside of the GitLab CIM file where the user just specifies which image to use. And then we can just use that image. So it doesn't even have to use tags, right? They just specify, hey, I want the image with Xcode 1213, and we'll just load that image from our disk, basically.
Yeah.
So that's another idea. We already exposed the image keyword in the custom executor, so we don't have to do anything like that. We just have to make the autoscaler support the image keyword to pick up that image, and it's fine.
So, and the concern being, how does the image size, the VM image size affect the execution?
It does not affect the execution itself, but it's going to affect the disk size, right? So imagine we have a 70 gigabyte image, right, per job. So that means we have 70 gigabytes per job and then some gigabytes for the user. So imagine 30 gigabytes. So per job costs us 100 gigabytes, right? That is really, really expensive. So if we have a disk size limit, which with Mac Stadium we do, I don't know that limit, that we're going to be limited by disk size. But if we just have one Xcode version installed, that image is going to shrink down to 30 gigabytes, right? So that is around 60, 70 per job. So that is saving us 40 gigabytes per job. So we can run more jobs concurrently and not be limited by disk. Does that math make sense?
Yep.
I'm not sure if that is a great idea, but something that I was thinking this morning, like why we're installing multiple versions. I do get like people need to have different Xcode versions, target different versions, but I'm curious how other competitors are doing and if there's a way for us to have different images per Xcode version.
Yeah, and I'll check into both of those, and I added a comment to the doc that links to Renee de Hassel's comment, but he's actually commenting on the closed beta, so we could take a look at that. And we could probably also pick him from some feedback as we iterate on these ideas. He seems to have a good handle on some of this stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be cool to also have the perspective of the customers, what are they expecting as they enroll in this program, how they would expect to use this.
Yeah, so if Pedro can write everything we just discussed, I think, and the issue, so we keep track of this, I think it would be beneficial.
Okay, the next point is XC build that I saw included in the issue. I don't see it anywhere in a package manager, so it seems we'll have to build this with CMake and Ninja. So it's probably good. I'll make a separate issue for that. This is more like XC build is a performance improvement, so it's not something that is really necessary for the first iteration.
We can pull it off if needed.
Yeah.
But this is for incremental build. Well, yeah, I guess for the closed beta. For the closed beta, we might have incremental builds, but for like end game, we're not gonna have incremental builds, right? Because we're not gonna reuse the same machine for the user, right? We're gonna create a machine per job. So
I don't know. I was asking that question later on.
Okay. So is incremental builds really beneficial at this point? It might be beneficial for closed beta, but not for like the end goal kind of thing.
So is it even worth to include XC build, or do we leave it?
I don't know. Let's discuss it in the issue.
Okay.
And which issue do you want to discuss that one in the image issue or a different issue?
I think an image issue, since that has everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
In it.
So this is already covered. I found out another issue with image names. It seems since last week, with their latest upgrades, they started limiting the size of, the length of the image names.
That's always been there, as far as I am aware. I had problems in the past with their image names.
It shouldn't be, because I was able to generate, there was a green build last week, exactly the same name, and I reran it this week, and it started failing with this issue.
Interesting.
So maybe they didn't document this. That's for sure.
Because I remember talking to them, like, why is this image not being saved? And they told me it's because of the length.
I wasn't sure if it was like the VM name or it was already with the image names. Huh. Okay.
I think so, yeah.
But your limit was higher. I think it was something around 38 characters.
I'm not sure. I don't remember. It was because of the autoscaler thing.
I have a good recollection of that, and it seemed it was like 38 characters, and now it's 29.
Okay,
so
they might have changed that then.
Yeah, I'll discuss this later with them. Yeah, then there's the disconnects. Okay, so Darren, up to you now.
Before we go into my things, Pedro, if you after you have your meetings with the Max Stadium folks, if you aren't getting like progress on it during this week, just ping me on Slack because I have my follow-up meeting with the account manager every Friday at 10. And every so often I can also pull John Cabanis on that as well. So if we need like, to get some traction and getting it solved, let me know. If it's not happening by Friday.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so cool. All right, so on the closed beta process, I don't want to this is kind of like my brain dump, getting stuff out of my head. I want to just run it by you, everyone in this call, to kind of make sure that it makes sense and kind of sync up on it. So in terms of the closed beta process, here's what I have so far, right? So the point one is submit a request form to get access to the closed beta. That the customer does that. We have the new project for doing that. We have the access form. We have 9 folks as of this point that have signed up. So that one is kind of locked and loaded, right? So the next step in the process is, what I've laid out is that Darren, the PDM, will review the request, the issues, update our capacity tracking worksheet. I've created a worksheet for that. It needs a little bit of work, right? And then sort of approve that. The next step is provision of VM. So that's my first question is, okay, who is going to actually provision the VM for the customer? What are we thinking?
Yeah, that is a rabbit hole I went down last week as well. There are a few things that we need to put in consideration. So the first thing probably is going to be me or Peter provisioning the VM. So that's something first of all, it's probably me or Pedro that's going to provision the VMs. That is something manual that we have to do, and something that is part of the closed beta. That's why we have a closed beta, right? 2, we want to limit this VM in the sense that we might have to create a Norca username and password for that specific customer, just so everything is isolated, right? That means they can't see the VM of other people and things like that. In any case, like the only way they can see other people's VM is through the Orca API, but like it's better to just limit them, right? And then we would need to know the project that they need the runner attached to, get the registration for that project. So probably through via email or something like that. We can check the database, but I'd rather not do that. So we need the registration token for them.
I wonder if on number 3, do we want to use the same issue that they're using to submit to get access as a way for them to post the registration token, maybe make that issue confidential? I don't know.
Maybe. At the end of the day, we would ask them to regenerate that token after we register the runner, just so the token is no longer valid, kind of thing. That is the hackiest thing ever. But
okay, we can work on that piece. But I guess I'm just thinking I kind of want to avoid email for passing the registration token.
Yeah. So that is for the project, and then he will have access. The user will have access to that runner for that project.
Right. So we're seeing those are the 3 steps. My other kind of question was the VM specs for the closed beta. So I was thinking we offer only 1 VM type. GitHub Actions, the 2 vCPU, 7 gigs of RAM, 14 gig SSD. Do you guys have any other thoughts about the size at the moment? I apologize, I haven't tested the performance in the last week. I'm definitely going to log in today.
I think it has to be 8 gigabytes for us, not 7. I'm not sure if we can control the amount of memory. on Next Stadium. We can control the amount of CPUs, but I'm not sure about the memory. I can remember. But
We can-
14 gigabytes SSD, that is a bit too low for us, but we can make it in the sense that they have 14 gigabytes available to them, just because our image itself is 32 gigabytes, right?
That's what's available to the customer. Okay, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
You won't even say SSD, or let's say 14 gigabytes available.
Yeah.
So far, what I've seen is that it's proportional to the amount of CPUs that you add.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's possibility to customize that.
Yeah, because I'm not sure. We'll have to investigate that. That's a good question. But I think the only option through Orca CLI is from specifying the amount of CPUs, and that duplicates, like, for example, 8 gigabytes RAM, 16 gigabytes, so on and so forth. But yeah.
So I guess you already answered my other question. I haven't checked the Orca docs lately, but I'm assuming that with the Orca API, we can provision the VM so that the load is evenly distributed, right? So like customer one, we're not going to do all 10 VMs on just say one Mac Pro.
We can specify the nodes they are assigned to, but by default it will pick up the least used one. Like,
okay, so cool.
That is the whole spiel about Orca, right? Like, it automatically provisions things to different Mac Pros.
So I check in that. My other question on the provisioning was the runner config for closed beta. So in our image, by that I mean, since you guys gave me a really good re-education yesterday, let's start using that rule. Since I was re-educated yesterday in terms of the runner config and concurrency, are we just going to be doing one worker config by default in our config.toml for this? What are our thoughts?
Yeah, ideally, like, I would say for the closed, like, we can improve it later on, right? Like, but let's start with the most simple thing, right? Like, one worker installed and set the concurrency to 10. So it can run 10 jobs at the same time, but we have one worker. And then if we see that it's not working well, or the concurrency is too high, or so on and so forth, we can do that. But for now, it's going to be just the shell executor registered and then the concurrency of 10. So it can run 10 jobs at the same time.
Okay, cool. So then number 4 is notifying the user. So we kind of talked about that. We'll clean it up a little bit. My last question is, when do we think we really want to start onboarding these? Week of September 7th, September 14th? What is our gut feel right now in terms of?
14th is more comfortable reason for me. Pedro can say more.
Yeah.
Pedro, take this one.
No, I think, yeah, when I saw 7, I thought, it's a bit, it's not as comfortable it could be done, but it would change priorities, I think. We have to shift priorities to get this.
Let's not do that. What I'm suggesting at the end, let's start the week of September 14th, but maybe we can even do a staggered rollout. Like, so I know that I hadn't followed up, but there was that one internal GitLab that had pinged us. GitLab should be like maybe onboard them first, like first 2 days, and then.
Oh yeah, the Guitar team, right?
Yeah, right. Whoever that was. You know what I mean? So even though we start like the week of the 14th, we can like go slow, like, the first user, day 1, and next, so that way we have we're not just like turning around everything. Then. Okay, cool. My last question was, and I hadn't really given this, I don't know if you guys have given thought to this, like, okay, so we provision it, like, when do we want to decommission the VM? Again, I'm assuming that we're going to keep the VM for the closed beta at least up and running, unless we have maintenance to do. Do we want to say, look, you've got this VM for 2 weeks, a month? What are we thinking?
I think that's mostly up your choice, really.
But I mean, on a technical perspective, you guys don't see any kind of like, commit for 3 weeks?
Yeah, we have zero say from a technical perspective, because it's a matter of creating VM. From a product perspective, like, my opinion would be, we'll leave it there until we create the open beta product, right?
I think that's
having some kind of auto scaler thing. But again, that is a product decision. We can try to rotate people, but from my experience, I never saw a closed beta just for a specific set of fields, and I'm kind of out of it. So, like, once I'm in, I'm always in there, kind of thing.
Right.
So until it's open beta and things like that, right?
So you can like, so as a user, you would expect a nice seamless transition. Hey, I'm on this, and now they're in open beta. I'm still able to use the environment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we can say, hey, you have, like if there are breaking changes, with 99% there is going to be breaking changes from closed beta to open beta. If there are breaking changes, hey, you have 2 weeks to migrate your jobs to the new platform, and then we'll just delete the VM manually.
I agree with that. That makes sense. Okay. And some of that was in my head, but I just wanted to just get some other feedback. Because you're just doing those mental brainings by yourself. You're doing it in a vacuum. And my last section was usage guidelines for closed beta. So this is kind of what I was like, this is just a brain dump. So I was wondering if our recommendation for closed beta should be, hey, when you define your pipeline, it's really a simple pipeline with no parallel job. And I was wondering if, and the reason I did that was if you look at below, if we'll get better scaling of the macros over time, and maybe better performance for pipeline execution times, quote unquote, because I don't know about the parallel jobs for multiple testing phases, but right, assuming things are simple, if we'll get better scaling, if we assume that, hey, one VM, one pipeline, all the jobs in the pipeline, versus having to spin up a VM for each job in the pipeline.
We only spin up a VM per job for security reasons, not performance reasons. Just because we can't have 2 users running untrusted code on the same VM. That is the only reason we use 1 VM per job and we delete it, just for security reasons. Not performance or anything like that. Yeah, that's my answer. Unless I misunderstood your question.
Oh, so I'm saying is, so right now in our current autoscaler for Linux, right? We spin up a VM per job.
Yeah.
Right? And that job could be across, for each job in the pipeline gets a new VM. So what I'm suggesting is, if the premise is we spin up a VM, but it's meant to execute, it's like sticky runner, it's meant to execute all of the jobs in that pipeline. And then only then, after all the jobs in that pipeline are done, then we tear down that VM. Flipping the premise in other words.
Yeah, that is where workspaces and sticky runners come into play, right?
Yep.
So that is something that workspace and sticky runners will allow us to do, having like a sticky, like 1 VM per pipeline and then tear down that VM after that pipeline. But yeah, that is something that both the autoscaler, the Docker machine executor and things like that will have to support when the sticky runners come into play.
Right, so that's what I was saying. So stepping back, kind of like the closed beta, do we just kind of let people know from the get-go, even though the GitLab has all this great out-of-the-box parallel jobs, what we recommend for the closed beta is that, what you're getting for the closed beta is just a VM, right? Right, so you're only getting a VM, 1 VM. But maybe, do we want to go, basically I guess what I'm saying is, do we want to say, look, let's be more prescriptive. Let's kind of only, on the Mac OS runners, let's only spin up a VM per pipeline. Even though I know we're still doing sticky runners work, do we want it to be proactive and do that upfront? But I know I don't have the data or anything. I'm just at this point.
That is something that we cannot do from a technical reason, just because GitLab, the Rails application, will not always assign the job to that runner, right? When we go with the autoscaler. Right now, like for production setup, we'll have multiple GitLab runner managers for macOS that all of them can pick up jobs individually, right? At the moment, there are no way to tell, hey, for this pipeline, always pick this runner. And then the runner will say, okay, will always pick this VM until we implement the sticky runner or workspace system.
So what I'm thinking then is that, so for closed beta, we don't necessarily have to talk about the guidelines. They're getting 1 VM anyway, but I think we'll definitely have to do a bunch of testing internally ourselves so that we say, you know what, hey, this probably works better if for GA, we only support sticky runners on the Mac OS.
Yeah, that is something that the user has to enable. So like if you're doing a macOS build, use sticky runners all the time. That is something that the user has to enable on his own. And things like that.
But I'm kind of thinking.
But sequencing wise, yes, it makes a lot of sense to sequence sticky runners and then macOS autoscaler thing.
Okay, but I'm almost kind of thinking that we have to do the testing to verify it.
Yeah.
My gut feel is telling me that I'm kind of going to be leaning to say, you know what, on Mac OS, we're not going to support parallel builds. We only support sticky. I just a gut feel. I don't know if that's going to go down well, but you know, again, I don't have the data yet. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, with my new proposal about sticker runners, we can support parallel builds on the same machine. That is something that the user has to do manually. Like that is something that the user sets on the runner configuration as we discussed yesterday using the concurrency limits. Because at the end of the day, it's the user who knows if they want concurrent builds on their machine or not. So we should not limit it. If it's a sticky runner, we run job. They can run multiple jobs if they want.
Right. So I guess to kind of like flip it a different way, what I'm looking for from a product perspective is this. So ignoring the user's config, I am looking for a simple way to make sure that we can efficiently scale those VMs and a cost-effective way of scaling those VMs. So in my simplistic data in mind, if I'm only like provisioning a VM for a quote unquote pipeline, and maybe it's an hour pipeline, 2 hours, 30 minutes, but at least that might be a simpler and cheaper scaling than saying, oh my gosh, I have to provision a VM for each job in a pipeline. That might kind of get out of whack really fast.
That is something I'm not sure that is something that we can hide from the user, but it's something that the user has to enable. Like
the user has to enable it, but I guess and then that's fine. But I'm just kind of like leaning towards saying we rely on the user to enable it, but our point of view is, hey, that's how you have to use it. Now the user can kind of break it.
Yeah, we can just say best practices is to use workspaces. So then you can use sticker runner. So then you can use even incremental builds might be useful at that case, right? You have one job of your pipeline building a specific app, and like one job of your pipeline is building a specific component, and the other, like at a later stage, building another specific component where they share components, right? So that is where incremental builds come into play. And maybe that is why they need sticker runners, so they have incremental builds. So their whole pipeline uses the same build cache overall. And that is why Android development and macOS development is so hard, just because we don't have the artifacts from one stage to another. And that is why most likely most people will use sticker runners in this case. Right. And that's why we should, like in our example, we should tell them, hey, it's best practice to use sticker runners. Yes, it's a bit selfish from our end too, so we just use one VM, but they don't need to know that.
Right, that's fair. I really thought, I know all the time, but the last section I had was possibly FAQ questions from users. This was just a brain dump. Like I'm thinking for the closed beta, like will someone ask me, can I SSH into the VM? You know, will I have access? You know,
I would say no, but when they are using the CI job, they have root access. So it's like their SSH into the machine, but we will not provide credentials just because for us to do that, we would have to give them the Orca VPN. We have to give them Orca logins. Like that is not ideal. So we just give them the VM and they just use it. They're using the shell executor, so technically they're SSHing inside of the VM through the CI job, and that's it. And that's how we should leave it.
Okay, cool. I'm thinking they can't increase the VM size during the closed beta. They can't increase the specs. Right? I'm just kind of like thinking ahead in terms of the potential FAQ questions. You know what I mean?
I mean, that is up to you. Pedro might have a better answer, but I'm not sure if we can resize VMs on the fly. We would have to create a new VM for the user. So I don't think we can change the specs without re-registering a new runner.
Right. Yeah, you have to deploy a new VM for a new configuration.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'll do is when I kind of update the FAQ question section in the Epic, I'll say, hey, resizing unavailable. Different VM spec, case-by-case basis, to kind of leave it open. Because maybe someone really...
I wouldn't even mention
case-by-case
basis. Yeah. Okay. If they really want a different VM size, they will ask you for it. I imagine anyways. That is like, again, this product decision, so that is completely up to you to take.
All right. Quick, from the last kind of high-level question, we're not going to get all the details in today, but in terms of the week of the 14th, we get customers on there. Where do we want them to submit bugs or feedback? I created that Mac OS beta project. Do we want them to do it there? Do we want them to do it in the runner project? Do we, what are we thinking?
Good point.
Yeah, we already have a tag for Mac shared runners, so I guess they could do it in the runner project unless we have anything against it.
I don't have anything against the new runner project. I just wanted to make sure I set the right guidelines, not necessarily the right expectations. Like, hey, submit an issue, submit feedback, but it's not going to be like a 24-hour turnaround. We're just gathering the feedback.
Yeah, it is feedback. It's feedback, not support.
Yeah,
we just
right.
need to make that clear.
Right. Okay. Cool.
One question I have is regarding support. Who is going to support the customers in the sense if there are problems? Who is going to work on them? Is the support team going to be involved in any case for this and things like that?
You want to, and that's for closed beta?
For a closed beta, like we can say, hey, there's no little to no support here. You're going to just deal with our engineers from time to time when problems crop up. But that is something that we need to take care of and make sure like we have bandwidth for at the moment as well.
Yeah. My initial thought was no support, but I'll still kind of like swizzle on that point, talk to Elliot when he's back, talk to the support team, see if we want to do anything beyond just saying, hey, no support, just give us feedback. And if it breaks, it breaks kind of a thing. But that's a good question.
Yeah.
Cool, that was my brain dump for this morning.
I just have one shout out mostly to Petra if you can take over my issue, just because I'm working on the AfterScript stuff, so I can only review the macOS stuff at this point, unless he has bandwidth issues.
No. Okay. So you want me to take this for creating the base image?
Yep.
Sure. Makes sense.
Awesome. I don't think I have.
Done. Do you have anything started on this, or is it completely okay?
I was almost done, but then deleted the VM by mistake because of some other issues, and I never actually picked it up again.
I just wasn't sure if you had done something since.
I think the only thing I've done is the admin password is already in the 1Password vault. But yeah, you can either generate a new password or do whatever you prefer.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. So I see the biggest part here is documenting the process, and okay, it's really documenting the process. The rest is I already see.
Yeah, most of it, like I try to document it as much as possible in the issue itself. So.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What's the best location for this documentation? Is it this issue or?
I would say in the README file of the Orca project, since this is the base image that the Orca project is going to use, right? The reason why I want this, why I think we need this, is so one, the admin password is no longer the default password, and two, our CI jobs will be a little bit quicker because we don't have to do all the updates, right? So right now inside, I think inside of our GitLab CI file, we specify 90 catalina.img, right?
Yeah.
To use that image as the base image. Basically what we want to do is specify runner-ci/base.img. So we use that instead of the 90 catalina. And that is just to save a bit more execution and not have the default password. Ideally, we should have the password change as well in the CI job through Ansible, so Ansible can actually change the admin password. But yeah, that is up to you to decide.
So you're thinking of this as another Ansible?
Yeah, it can be part of the macOS setup role, right? So the macOS setup role is specifying image update, rebooting the image, and specifying some other permission, the time zone, right? We should have a new task inside of the macOS role to specify the admin password, and the admin password will be this random string. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And then we can have this base image with the latest updates, so the CI job is a bit quicker.
Yep. Sounds good. Okay, it seems like, yeah.
Hey,
Okay.
thanks everyone for inviting me. That was super cool. I appreciate you allowing me to brain dump.
One question, Darren. Have you given any thought yet about the number of CPUs that will end up provisioning VMs with?
The number.
Like, will we have, in total per node we have 24 CPUs. Will we be using 4 per VM, 8?
Oh, gotcha. Okay, check this out. I haven't. Hold on. Let me find it really fast. I just dumped them.
Didn't we just discuss this that we're going to use 2 CPUs, 8 gigs of RAM? Or
Right, we did. But there's. Let me also give you guys the link to the spreadsheet so we can play around with it as well. I'll find the link to the spreadsheet. Just dump it in here, and and you can kind of like take that spreadsheet and kind of like play with it. I lost track of it, but I'll find it in this. Oh, here it is. It's Mac OS Build Cloud Planning. Here we go. Dumping the spreadsheet link in here now. Where's the dunk? And oh my gosh, where's the dunk? Here we go. Pedro. And that's the doc link. Let me make sure that spreadsheet is shared. Yeah, and you want to get that to edit that. So in the first tab of that spreadsheet, there is an initial, and anything that spreadsheet you can like hack up, duplicate, modify, create your own version if it doesn't work. But this is my first pass of like kind of like figuring out like VM sizing and costing for that first tab. And again, if there's a different way to look at it, a different like algorithm, create your own spreadsheet tab and hack it up. It's not a big deal. But this was just like my first brain dump from past life.
And last question, do you know anything more about the GDK team if they want to be one of the first customers for this?
I think the runner team can try and be the first customer as well. We have a Parallels executor. We can try and install Parallels inside of the macOS VM and run those tests inside of Parallels. Because at the moment, VirtualBox and Parallels are not something that we run inside of our CI, right? So those tests are kind of written, but they're not actually run. So we can try and use the macOS shared runners to run the Parallels executor tests if we want to.
That's certainly an interesting scenario. I was just thinking of, having a real-world project that leverages like Ruby and this and that, different frameworks to see that, to validate that the setup we have in terms of changing versions, everything is working as expected. In that sense, GDK is already well documented, in terms of what the setup is and what's needed to get it building. So it could be a useful exercise to try to run that project, run that job in our shared runner to validate that we have it.
Do you want to provision them first the week of the 14th and then and have them be the first dog food type of thing?
Yeah.
If you can reach out, like how they would use it, like would they just, I know some of their pipeline is to actually set up the JTK inside of the VM. So maybe they can do the same for macOS, but I think we need to talk to the JTK team to see like how, if we provide them a macOS machine, how would they use it and things like that.
Cool. I can take that.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
I was just going to add one more thing. When you guys look at the spreadsheet, there's the VM sizing and cost calculator tab, which is the one I created. And then the queue planning tab came from Andrew Newgate. That's what they use for .com. So kind of like two different ways to think about how we think about how to plan for scaling. All right.
All right.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you.
Cheers.
Who will create the issue for the JTK stuff?
There is, he pinged me on the Mac OS image issue. You talking about the JDK team? Let me just ping him there.
Yeah.
Let me just ping him back there. I believe it's the same person from the JDK team that pinged us in the Mac OS.
Okay.
Let me just re-ping him back on that to start.
Okay. Sounds good.
Cool. Cheers.
You what?